I've been a school janitor for nearly 20 years, and I've seen my fair share of strange things while working the night shift. Schools at night have a way of getting under your skin: the empty hallways, the faint hum of the lights, the distant echoes that sometimes sound like whispers. But nothing compares to what happened one stormy night in the old gym of the high school I'd worked at for nearly a decade. It was one of those nights where the sky was a deep shade of purple, heavy with thunderclouds. The rain was coming down in sheets, and every so often lightning would light up the hallways in an eerie flash, followed by the rumbling of thunder that shook the whole building. The storm had knocked out the power in the neighborhood earlier, but the school had a backup generator that kicked in after a few seconds, giving the halls a dim, flickering light that didn't do much to ease the tension. I had a routine, and that night was no different. I started with the classrooms, moving methodically down the rows of desks, dusting and picking up any leftover trash. By the time I finished the classrooms and hallways, the thunder was almost constant, each clap louder than the last. I was used to working alone, but something about that night put me on edge. I kept thinking I saw shadows moving in my peripheral vision, only to find nothing when I turned my head. I brushed it off as nerves, figuring the storm was playing tricks on me. Finally, it was time for the gym. I'd saved it for last, as usual. The gym was the largest area I had to clean, and it took the longest, especially when I had to polish the floor. I grabbed the floor polisher from the closet and wheeled it down the hall. The thing was old and heavy, and the buzzing sound it made was enough to drown out everything else around me. The gym was pitch black, save for the dim glow from the exit signs. I hit the switch to turn on the overhead lights, but only half of them came on, casting strange shadows across the bleachers and the basketball hoops. I figured the storm had done something to the wiring and shrugged it off. I'd cleaned in worse conditions. I started up the polisher and got to work. The machine moved across the floor, leaving a gleaming path in its wake, but the constant thunder and dim lighting made me feel like I was in a horror movie. Just as I reached the center of the gym, a deafening clap of thunder shook the building, and every single light went out. The only illumination was the occasional flash of lightning from the high windows. I stood there, frozen, listening to the silence that followed the thunder, my heart pounding. After a few seconds, the backup generator kicked in and the lights flickered back to life. But something felt off. I had this strange sensation that I wasn't alone. I shook my head, trying to dismiss the thought. I'd been working there for years, and the only company I'd ever had were a few stray rats. But that feeling wouldn't go away. I went back to work, trying to keep my mind off it, focusing on the rhythmic hum of the polisher. I'd only made it a few more feet when I heard it, a faint, shuffling sound coming from the bleachers. I stopped, letting the hum of the polisher die down, and strained to listen. I told myself it was probably a draft or some debris being blown around by the storm. I turned the polisher back on, but I was more aware now, glancing toward the bleachers every so often, just in case. The shuffling sound came again, a little louder this time, like footsteps. And then, just as a flash of lightning lit up the gym, I saw something, a figure, moving between the rows of the bleachers. I shut off the polisher, and the silence hit me like a brick. I squinted, trying to make out the figure, but the shadows were too deep. I took a few steps forward, heart pounding, and called out, "Hello? Is someone there?" I waited, hoping maybe it was one of the teachers or a security guard who'd stayed late, but deep down I knew no one else was supposed to be there. I took a step closer, and another flash of lightning lit up the room, illuminating the figure for just a split second. It was tall, thin, almost skeletal, and its head was tilted at an unnatural angle, as if it were staring right at me. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over the polisher. My mind raced, trying to come up with a logical explanation. Maybe it was a shadow, a trick of the light, but I'd seen it, clear as day. The lights flickered again, and the figure was gone. I stood there, paralyzed, staring at the spot where it had been. The gym was silent, except for the sound of rain pounding on the roof. I wanted to run, to get out of there as fast as I could, but I felt like rooted to the spot, like something was holding me there, forcing me to stay. Then, out of nowhere, I heard a loud, echoing slam from the doors leading to the locker rooms. My heart skipped a beat, and I forced myself to move, walking slowly toward the exit, trying not to make a sound. Every step I took seemed to echo, each one louder than the last. I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see that figure again, but the gym remained empty, or so it seemed. Just as I reached the door, I heard it again, the sound of footsteps, this time closer, faster. I threw open the door and ran down the hallway, not daring to look back. The only light came from the emergency lights along the floor, casting an eerie glow that made the shadows seem even darker. I made it to the janitor's closet and slammed the door shut, my back pressed against it, breathing heavily. I fumbled for my phone, my hands shaking as I dialed the number for the security office. The line rang once, twice, 3 times. No answer. I could still hear the footsteps, echoing down the hall, coming closer. I held my breath, praying they'd pass by, that whatever was out there wouldn't find me. And then, just as suddenly as they'd started, the footsteps stopped. Silence. I waited, my heart pounding, listening for any sign of movement. But there was nothing. Just the faint hum of the emergency lights and the distant sound of thunder. After a few minutes, I worked up the nerve to peek out into the hallway. It was empty. I could see the exit doors at the end of the hall, illuminated by the flashing lightning outside. I didn't waste any time. I bolted down the hall, threw open the doors, and ran out into the rain, not stopping until I was halfway across the parking lot. When I finally looked back, the school stood silent and dark, the lights flickering in the windows, casting strange shadows that looked almost human. I don't know what I saw that night, or if I even want to know, but I quit the next day, and I haven't set foot in that school since. And every time I pass by it on the way to my new job, I can't help but feel like something's watching me from those dark, empty windows.